Welcome to Texas Courthouses, part 1 of 3. This courthouse series, where I focus in on the courthouses state by state, has been put together to illustrate the difference really between the old world courthouses and the more modern structures that have been created. And you'll see that in this video. But before we get to the courthouses, I just want to mention briefly a lot of these have been demolished and replaced, and a lot of that happened through the Public Works Administration, which was implemented under Theodore Roosevelt's tenure as President of the United States. Here you can see the types of infrastructure that they were intending to replace, to build anew. It's an interesting proposition when you put that through the lens of the cover-up of the old world architecture. So you can see here the Public Works Administration was part of the New Deal of 1933, was implemented as a reaction to the Great Depression at the time. Secretary of the Interior Harold LeClaire Ikes was the man behind the motion of this. And you can see here they wanted to dedicate $3.3 billion in the first year, 3.3. If you know, you know. And they also mentioned down here not to be confused with the WPA, which is also a part of what we'll see here. Both of these two administrations, part of this New Deal program, to quickly demolish and rebuild in a much simpler form. And the whole guise of that being to provide employment at the time, whether it be in the form of demolishing and salvaging materials or building anew. And FDR, an interesting figure when it comes to the amount of time he served, coming right through the 30s, right to the end of World War II, and actually serving 4 terms, and he dies right at the beginning of his 4th term. But many people, well, before we go any further, I would like to direct you to my Strange Gentleman video. He was certainly a prominent member of that Odd Fellows organization. But what can't be overlooked here is the fact that he ended up marrying his cousin, Eleanor Roosevelt, who was apparently historically highly revered as a very prominent first lady. In many cases, if you dig a little bit deeper beneath the surface, you start to think maybe she was the handler, the one behind the scenes for this FDR gentleman. Here she is with Queen Elizabeth and King George VI. And right even past the point of FDR's death, she gets into the United Nations under Truman, so she seems to transcend several administrations. She was also a prominent member of the sister organization of the Strange Gentleman, the Rebeccas. Here you can see the Rebeccas on the right, the Oddfellows on the left, and basically a sister organization of these gentlemen. And we've looked at the Oddfellows quite a few times here on this channel. Their tie-in with the orphan trains and the repopulation agenda. And it appears to me that there's much more going on with this Eleanor Roosevelt behind the scenes, under the guise of humanitarian philanthropy. Here you can see her with the Universal Declaration of Human Rights through the UN. If you know anything about the UN and the implementation of the United Nations and the tiptoe toward the global governance, it really should tell you all you need to know. I think what I'll do is I'll show you a short video clip of her, and we'll get to the courthouses.
Very quickly, the public learned that the new First Lady was not like her predecessors in the White House. She was visible, outspoken, and actively involved with her husband's policies and programs. When FDR needed someone to explain his latest New Deal reforms to the people, it was Eleanor who took to the radio.
It is my high honor tonight, as President of the National Broadcasting Company, to introduce to the radio audience the First Lady of the land, Mrs. Franklin D. Roosevelt.
The purpose of the National Recovery Act is to bring us back to prosperity. But we want a prosperity which will make life more worth living for all of our people.
Just keeping up with it was a challenge. As one newspaper woman wrote, "Please, God, make Eleanor tired for just one day."
She sure puts a lot of muscle into smashing that bottle. Anyway, these are all things to think about as we look through the Courthouses of Texas, Part 1. As you can see here, there are many counties in Texas, I think almost 300. I had to split it up into 3 videos, otherwise it would have been far too long. So these are in alphabetical order, this first third chunk in this video. And what I've tried to do for each of these is give you the county, the city or town they are in, when they were built, and a rough population for the time that they were built. You can see here Anderson County in Palestine, 1886, population 5,000 people. This was burnt in a fire in 1913. And then we have the second one, we're told, built in 1914. So I guess the year after the fire, they built a new courthouse. And if you're familiar with my channel, you'll know that my suggestion is that these were both standing for quite some time, and that the history of the United States is not what we have been told. In fact, we have been given a false start for the beginning of all of this architecture and infrastructure. I think all this dates back to the early 1800s and what went on there. The waters have been severely muddied, and the story has been rewritten. You can see here Angelina County Courthouse in Lufkin, built in 1903, population 2,000, raised in 1953. Look at the dome on top of this. 2,000 people living there at the time, and this is what they built. And many people have told me that they were quite amazed with these courthouse videos, because they really do illustrate the sparse populations and the grandiosity of the structures themselves. And you'll see the replacement structures as well. This is the replacement structure for Angelina County. And just to illustrate the difference between the old world and the new world. Aransas County in Rockport, built in 1890, having what you would consider to be typical Moorish styling. Less than 1,000 people there living at the time, demolished in 1956. So we're seeing several buildings now having been demolished in the 50s, and this is the new courthouse in Aransas. Of course, if my pronunciations are wrong, I apologize. No intention here to offend locals. I'm just trying to cover as much geography as I can with my videos. Here we have the Archer County Courthouse in Archer City, built in 1892. Less than 1,000 people living there at the time. I assume all women and children were hands on deck with all the gentlemen, able-bodied gentlemen, to construct such a magnificent courthouse. It does still stand, but you can see what they've done to it when they've removed that central dome location. Too much of an indication. I think it would cause too many people to scratch their heads. They do this quite often, chopping the upper areas of these buildings off. Armstrong County in Claude. This one we're told was built in 1912 when there was only 700 people living there at the time. It must have been quite an effort to get the columns up there. It still stands. Looks like it's been a bit parged, stucco parged, possibly a bit whitewashed, but still too much building for such a small population at the time. Atasca County in Pleasanton, built in 1885 at a time when there's only 350 people roughly living in Pleasanton. Not a huge structure, but quite grand, to say the least. Jordanton. This would be the second. This one still stands. You can see it here in the modern day. So they must have changed locations within the county. This one built at a time when there's 682 people, roughly, in 1920. Sorry, if you see the date not matching the build date, it means there's no population data for the time of the build date. This is the earliest I could find on these locations. So who knows what the population was at the time that this was said to have been built. A much richer history lies beneath the surface here, and that's the point of the channel. Austin County in Belleville, built in 1888 at a time when there's about 700 people living there, and it burns down in 1960, and of course they had to replace it, so they replaced it with a box. And again, a very stark contrast in styles between the two. And you can come and say, well, that's just how they built at the time. I think that I've provided enough evidence on this channel to suggest that there was much more going on in the past than what we've been told. Bailey County Courthouse in Muleshoe, Texas, built in 1925, population less than 800. It still stands. And some of them, yes, not as grand as others, but for the sake of archiving all of this into one video, you'll find them in this presentation as well. Bandera County in Bandera, built in 1890, population 372. Very interesting why you would build a courthouse in such a manner. Must have really revered the law. Bosque County in Meridian. This one built in 1886, and population in 1900, 14 years later, was just under 1,000. So who knows what the population was then. This one still stands. There you can see it in a modern day look at it. So many of them having the central towers, which is a very difficult aspect of construction. And of course, we're told at these early time periods, this is Bastrop County, 1882, about 1,500 people living there at the time. And of course, at the time, they did not have the means that we have in the modern day to construct with all of our modern technologies. And it still stands, and often you will get the symbolism right in front of your face on the grounds of these structures, letting you know who has rewritten history and kept the truth from the people. Baylor County in Seymour. This one's built in 1884, less than 1,000 people living there at the time. Take a look at the cupola on that. Demolished in the 60s. And I'm sure they demolished it because they needed a larger structure. No, that's not the case. Here's the modern courthouse in Baylor County. B County in Beeville, looking like it's got a bit of a beehive on the courthouse. This one built in 1912, and there's about 3,000 people living there, and this one still stands. A nice looking building. I just often wonder how old these really are. We're looking at 250 years old. Some people will stretch this and go back and say they're 1,000 years old. I'm not so sure 1,000 years is accurate, just for the state of the building materials, but I could see 250 years, most certainly for many of these, possibly 300. And if you're not familiar with this theory, you'll probably say, well, what about the story of the Indians living at the time? I think all history has been rewritten, and it's actually quite overt, the rewriting of history and the horrors that have gone on. So it's not really such a mystery. Bell County in Belton, 1884. They built this when there was about 2,000 people living there. I guess they were all... everyone had a room, it seems. You can see all these scattered horse and buggies out in the front here. And this one still stands. Belton. Looking quite old as well. In San Antonio, Bexar County. This one was built in 1896, we're told, at a population of 40,000 people. I haven't covered San Antonio yet. I have covered several locations in Texas, Galveston, Dallas, and Austin. If you're interested in those, you can check them out in my catalog. This one still stands. And it's quite magnificent. It's actually amazing how well the building materials stand the test of time on many of these. Blanco County, this was built when there was only 300 people living in Blanco in 1885. In Johnson City, two courthouses for Blanco. Bowie County, or Bowie County, in New Boston. So many of these places I haven't heard of. Built in 1889, at a time when there's just under 400 people living there. Burns down in a fire in 1987. Of course, they replace it with one of these. And there really is something soul-sucking about these modern structures. It's not just lack of willingness to build in such a manner. Something has clearly been lost along the way. Brazoria County in Brazoria, 1894. The population is about 500 at the time. They demolished it, but I could not find a date. And we can just take a closer look at how absolutely absurd this structure is. With the curved open areas on the corners, little turrets coming off those corners. Very difficult to build in such a manner, and absolutely absurd to think that this was done at a time when there's about 500 people living there. Imagine the rationale trying to justify building such a structure. Imagine them trying to muster the workforces. A lot of people will say, oh, they brought workers in from all around to build these things. Well, these, as you can see, most of these were going up in and around the same time. And this is only the courthouses. And when you start to piece together all of the structures, the different structures in all of the different towns, it's quite laughable. Another one in Brazoria, built in 1897, about 1,000 people in 1920. And still stands, but again, you can see what they've done to this. Really, they've really scaled it back. And I'm not sure if it still stands because this is the modern one. So that one, this one's probably has been demolished. Not sure if you're local. If you know anything more about it, put that in the comments section. Always appreciate that. Brazos County in Bryan, Texas. Built in 1892, 3,000 people living there, demolished in the 50s and replaced by a box. Brewster County in Alpine, Texas, built in 1887. You can see here the earliest population coming out from 1920, and they had just over 1,000 people living there. How many people will they tell us were around in 1887? I don't even think they know. This one still stands, but it looks like, again, it has definitely been scaled back. Silverton, built in 22, population 400, still stands. Brooks County in Falfurrias, built in 1914, population 6,000 in 1950. That's the earliest population demographics I could find for Falfurrias. Still stands. Quite the sturdy-looking structure. Of course, the lower reaches. We have Brown County Courthouse in Brownwood, Texas, built in 1884 at a time when there's about 1,000 people living there. It must be demolished. I could not find the data on that. This one is also in Brownwood, built in 1916. And it looks like this one still stands. Burleson County, built in 1890, population 1.25 thousand at the time, roughly. And I don't think it's around because this is the one that replaced it. Although it's in Caldwell, well, both in Caldwell, my mistake. 1927, and you can see here it still stands. We have the amazing courthouse in Caldwell County in Lockhart, Texas, built in 1894 when there were 1,500 people roughly living there. And it's just extravagant, over-the-top courthouse, and it still stands. Certainly one you want to go check out if you're able to. As you can see here, it's in pristine condition as well. Calhoun County, built in 1911, population 1.7 thousand, demolished in 1959, and replaced by something looking like several boxes jammed together. Looks like they're ready to go out for recycling. Callahan County, built in 1900, population 1.5 thousand, possibly demolished in the 20s. Funny postcard, it's even got a sort of a stenciling of a statue on top. Even that part, the dome part, is sort of stenciled in. And then this is the modern version for Callahan County. This one's Cameron County in Brownsville. Built in 1882. Population 5,000 at the time. The upper portion was destroyed by a hurricane. Again, a likely story. We see this a lot. Hurricanes, tornadoes, floods, fires, all responsible for the scaling back of many of these structures. And you can see what they've done to it here in the modern day. Same structure, but a far cry from what it once was. Brownsville again, built in 1912. Here's the supposed replacement. Built at a time when they have 10,000 people living there. It still stands to this day. Camp County in Pittsburgh, Texas, built in 1881. There's 700 people living there at the time. Carson County, Panhandle, Texas, 1909. Population is about 500 at the time. Looks to have been demolished sometime in the 30s. I think they're saying that's the old jail next to it as well. Way too much building for the populations. And there's the replacement. A little bit more flair to it than some of the other replacements, but still showing us the contrast, the stark contrast between the new world and the old world. Cass County Courthouse in Linden, Texas, built in 1861. That's very early. Earliest population data coming from 1890, when they only had 444 people living there, we're told. And again, the symbolism out front and center. There it is again. A very early structure, even in the narrative that we're given. Built in 1906. This one is Castro County in Dimmitt. At the time, well, we don't have a population for the time it was built. You can see here it was only 800 people living there in the 30s, and this is also when it was demolished in the 30s. So this would be fitting right into that Public Works Administration New Deal implemented by the Roosevelts, kissing cousins. There's a replacement. Chambers County in Anahuac, built in 1911. Population in 1950 was 1.2 thousand. And it burned down in 1935. Convenient timeline. No doubt that created work. Take a look at that structure. Why the need for all the urns? Do they just have that much style? Or is there much more going on in our past? So what was North America really? I've been reading lately a few people theorizing that part of the old Tartarian Mongol Empire stretched right on through the Americas. And really what the Louisiana Purchase was is it's kind of all linked in with Napoleon right around that same time frame, is the taking over of that land. And then of course we have so much destruction and war, so many ways to erase history. We really do not have a clear picture of the past. Cherokee County in Rusk, Texas, built in 1889. The population at the time is 1.3 thousand. Looks to have been demolished. This is the remodeled version of this one. And again, you have that curious sort of half-erased dome. It's almost like they attempted to erase the dome, but they didn't quite erase it all. Didn't want whoever was looking at this to know that that was there. It makes you wonder. There's the replacement. Childress County. This one's built in 1891, we're told. Population in 1900 is 692, demolished in the 30s as a part of the Public Works Administration project, and replaced by one of these more typical buildings you would expect from that era. Clay County in Henrietta, Texas. This one's built in 1884. Supposedly they're working on it still here in the photo. Only 2.1 thousand people living there in 1890, 6 years after its completion, we're told. This is another one in Clay County. Apparently this one still stands. I don't have a lot of information on it, but there it is. We'll keep moving forward. I hope you enjoy these courthouse compilations. I do intend to work my way through many of the states. I think as the volume increases, the case can be made a lot better for there being some sort of cover-up of history going on here. This one's said to be in Cochran County, Morton, Texas, said to have been built in 1926, at a time when there's 1.1 thousand people. Oh, sorry, living in 1940. We don't have population data from 1926. And either that's a modification or that's a box next to a box. Cooke County, Robert Lee, Texas, built 1891. Population in 1930 was 490. So yes, this one is long gone. As you can see there, I could not find the date, and has been replaced by this. Coleman County in Coleman, Texas, built 1884, population 906 in 1890. Has been remodeled, we're told, but I don't think that's the same structure. Looks to be a replacement. Possibly a lot of these are built on the infrastructure below, whatever was beneath these structures. Many have reported several basement layers, things of that nature, with many of these old structures. Many of them are quite closely guarded and protected, kept secret, not necessarily open to the public. Some aren't. This is Collin County in McKinney, Texas, built in 1874 at a time when there's 500 people living there, and they just had to add a little stone wall down along the bottom, apparently. And you always get these dedication plaques. They're saying it was reconstructed in 1927. I wonder how much of it was erased, because there's the new one showing no indication of what the old one looked like. Collingsworth County in Wellington, Texas, supposedly built in 1893. Population in 1910 is 576. Demolished in 1931. Replaced by this. In Colorado County in Columbus, Texas, we have this beautiful structure built in 1891. We're told at a time when there's 2.1 thousand people living there. Of course, it has been demolished. A magnificent looking structure hidden in behind the trees in this postcard. And we have what supposedly is a replacement structure with the dome. Very prominent looking structure itself, and this one still stands. And you can see that almost nautical looking dome here on the top. A lot of metal in the building materials. I think having to do a lot with harnessing of etheric energy for the infrastructure of the old world. Of course, all of this has been obstructed from our perception and knowledge of the past, to the point where you can be called crazy for even suggesting it. Comal County in New Braunfels, Texas. This one's supposedly built in 1898. Population at the time 2,000 people. Here you have a nice looking fountain out front. Fountain's a part of that whole energetic system, the cooling portion. And this one still stands, and it's beauty. Very, very well built, as you can see. And just interesting up here too, you have these strange, what they might try to call weather vanes, but much more to that story, I would say. Comanche County in Comanche, Texas, built 1891, at a time when there's 1.2 thousand people living there, and they tore this one down in 1939. What we would call sometimes in the trades a make-work project. Rip it up and build a new one. But of course they're not going to build to that scale, they're going to replace it with something like this. Concho County in Paint Rock, Texas, built in 1886, at a time when there's about 300 people living there. You can tell it's built in 1886 because you have the date front and center. No need to question official history. The truth is put right out in front of you to absorb. Certainly don't question that. And there it is, looking like it's something you would expect to see in the French countryside. But no, this is in Texas. Gainesville, and this is the Cooke County Courthouse in Gainesville, Texas, built in 1880. 2.6 thousand people living there, succumbed to fire in 1909 and replaced by this one, we're told, built in 1909, we're told, and it still stands. I'm just looking to see, it looks pretty similar to the one that we see there, but again they have the metallics of the dome. The old world offering so much possibility, so much potential for the truth of our past. The past that has been given to us is quite depressing, I think, and demeaning toward humanity. Coryell County in Gatesville, Texas, built in 1897 when there's 1.5 thousand people living there. Got all sorts of statue work going on. Cupola on top of the dome. Several miniature domes out here. This one still stands. It's certainly worth a look. Take a look at the colors, bright colors on that. Certainly looking like they could be power stations of some, as some have hypothesized. Even in a not such a literal form, but in a societal form, the courthouse is certainly a power station, power center. Cattle County or Cattle County, I'm not sure. I have it is either misspelled on the postcard or by me. Paducah, Texas, not to be confused with Paducah, Kentucky. I did a video on Paducah, Kentucky. Built in 1893, 1.3 thousand people living there in 1910. Demolished in the 20s. That's quite a short lifespan for such a massive structure, for such a small population. Replaced by this. Still getting a lot of symbolism going on this one as well. Crockett County in Ozona. This one's built in 1902. Population 2.8 thousand in 1950. No idea what the population was at the time. There it is in the modern day. Look at the stonework on that. Feeling a lot older. Crosby County in Crosbyton. This one's built in 1914. Population's 820 in 1920. This one still stands. And there it is. In Culberson County here in Van Horn, Texas. This one's built in 1912. Looking like it's all alone on the prairie, if you will. At a time when there's about 500 people living there. That one's gone. This is what replaced it. Culbertson County. We're told this one's built in 1912. Don't think that's right. Sorry. But we'll keep going. Dalham County in Dalhart. 1903. 2.5 thousand people living there in 1910, 7 years later. These all looking quite old. And you definitely get the sense that they had to erase a lot of this evidence, and the Public Works Administration and the projects underneath that administration certainly would have been a way to expedite that process. Of course, that is followed by the urban renewal projects under the Truman administration, which continued to carry out that demolition process, the erasing of the past. There's quite a coordinated effort down through time during the 1900s to erase a lot of this past in the name of progress, in the name of updating infrastructure. Much of this has been erased. We'll keep moving forward. Now we get to Dallas, spectacular old world city. This is a quite well-known courthouse in Dallas, Texas, built in 1893. There's about 40,000 people living there at the time. Still stands. This one's a bit of a mystery with the dome. You see it with and without, old and new, in photographs. So it's a bit of a head-scratcher on that one. But a beautiful-looking structure, making very little sense. And I do believe built in a very short period of time. Many of these don't provide a build duration. They barely give you the date, the year that they were completed, often. Coming to Dawson County Courthouse in Lames, built in 1916, 1.1 thousand people living in 1920. And I don't know if this is supposed to be sort of a scaled back version of what it once was. But if it is, it's par for the course, or it has been replaced. Deaf Smith County in Hereford, Texas. Built in 1910, 1.7 thousand people living there at the time. Still stands. A lot of these modern ones, they don't really have the grandeur for some reason of the old postcards. Something seems to be missing. Not sure what exactly is going on there. Delta County in Cooper, Texas. This one's supposedly built in 1900. And this one was demolished, although I do not have a date for it. You can see the suspicious gentleman, gathered out front for the photograph. Quite an amazing structure, really. You have it looks like eagles, some sort of bird with spread wings along the top, and all you have left now is the cornerstone, and of course, letting you know who's involved with the elimination of the structure. And there it is, its replacement. And we move on to Denton, Texas. I don't have the city for this one. Built in 1896 at a time when there were 4,000 people living there. I find it difficult to imagine pulling up in my horse and buggy to such a structure. Look at this, is actually quite unique with these little four-sided domes around the central dome. And this one actually still stands. Something you can go check out. Several stories. 1896, they'll tell us it was built. Certainly don't build them like that anymore, do they? DeWitt County in Cuero. Built in 1897, population 3,000 at the time. And also still stands. That's certainly worth a look as well. 1890s. They were putting this kind of stuff up in small town Texas, if you believe those sorts of things. Dimmitt County in Carrizo Springs, built 1884. Population 6 years later was just under 300. No slouch of a building, though, that's for sure. Very prominent stonework going on there. Has been replaced by this one. Donley County in Clarendon, Texas. Built 1894, population 1,000 people at the time. And it still stands. Very pretty looking structures, too. You can imagine why so many were removed. I often wonder why some of these do still stand, if there was such a concerted effort to demolish them. Were there people that were so attached to these structures that they felt compelled to keep them standing down through time? Did the beauty of the structure overtake the people of the area? Duval County, San Diego, Texas, built in 1916, 2,000 people living there at the time. There it is. Eastland County in Eastland, Texas, built in 1896. Population at the time was about 500 people. Of course, it's long gone. And all that's left of it would be one of these. So I hope you're picking up on the theme that's coming across here in this video. It always seems to be a very similar theme in my videos. What type of secrets have been kept from the people? Here's a replacement for the courthouse in Eastland. This one's supposed to be built in 1928. Ector County, Odessa, Texas, built in 1904. Population was only 2.4 thousand in 1930. Who knows what the population was in 1904? Certainly not supposed to have these types of structures. So it ends up being replaced by this one, and then by this one in Ector County. Yet another one with those prominent stone, very large stone walls Edwards County in Rock Springs, built in 1891, population's about 1,000 in 1930. So 40 years prior, how many people are living in Rock Springs? Are there enough people to justify such a construction? You think a single story would do? And interestingly here, they're telling us this is after a cyclone. So likely there was much more going on, and they're just putting this hip roof on the top and have removed whatever ornamentation existed in the upper reaches of this structure. It still stands. And this gives you a good sense of the stonework, the bulgy stonework going on here. Quite a unique looking structure. Bit of detail going on the top here as well. El Paso, Texas, an absolute stunner, built in 1894 at a time when there's about 10,000 people living there. This one has been demolished. What a tragedy that this thing no longer stands. And as you can see, some of these ones that do still stand are in quite pristine condition, so there really is no justification for the demolition other than what I can think of is to erase evidence of the past. But it was replaced by this one, we're told, and eventually replaced by this one. El Paso, Texas. Ellis County in Waxahachie, what a great name that is, built in 1896. So many of these going up. You can just try to envision each of these little towns piecing together these courthouses in and around the same time. You can just imagine the requirements for materials, infrastructure to get these materials to the sites, and of course labor. It all becomes so very far-fetched. Only about 4,000 people living in Waxahachie at the time. This one still stands, and my God, is that not an absolute stunner. So if you're anywhere near Waxahachie, I would definitely go take a look at that. In Erath County, Stevensville, Texas, we have this 1892 structure, built at a time when there's 1,000 people living there. This one still stands as well, again with the two-tone, the light white almost, and then the red colors. You're seeing a lot of that here in Texas. Falls County Courthouse in Marlin, Texas. This one's built in 1888. 2,000 people living there at the time, demolished in the 30s. Maybe these were the horses that were involved with the build. Who knows? Or the descendants. Here's its replacement. Fannin County in Bonham, Texas. This one's built in 1889 at a time when there's only 3,000 people living there. This looks to be 3 stories plus the dome. Tower and dome, I should say. It still stands, and again, pristine, absolute pristine condition. Fayette County in LaGrange, Texas, built 1891, 1.7 thousand people living there at the time. Interesting, looks to be an after-the-fact fire escape of some sort. Still stands, no more fire escape. Take a closer look at some of this. Interesting ornamentation going on here, looking like maybe a bit of a angel type cherub thing, possibly a gargoyle over here. Very strange iconography for small town Texas, if you will. Even the columns way up high here on the tower is just very interesting. Fisher County in Roby, Texas. This one's supposedly built in 1910. Population was only 600 10 years later. This one has been demolished, of course. Who's gonna believe that story that this was built? Well, let's just guess and say there was 400 people in 1910. Who's gonna believe that? Nobody. So you have to get rid of it. And you can put a little cornerstone, and you can tell us who the architect was and the contractors and anyone else involved, and we're just expected to believe it. But I don't. You can if you want to, because that's the replacement right there. This is the modus operandi of so many of these structures. Floyd County in Floydada, built in 1892. Population almost 20 years later is just over 600 people, so they got rid of it. And they end up building this one in 1911, we're told, but they got rid of this one as well. And of course the next one's going to be bigger and more grandiose. No, it's not. It's going to be 3 boxes squished together. Ford County in Crowell, Texas. Crowell, built in 1910, we're told, at a time when there's 1.3 thousand people living there. And I think it's the same structure. And what's happened is so much of the upper area and these little porches have been removed. And there it is. That's what they do to these. You might say that this one has been foobarred, if you're familiar with that term. If you're not, look it up. Fort Bend County in Richmond, Texas, built in 1908. About 1,000 people living there at the time. It's a lot of work to go to for only having 1,000 people living in this town. You think you could have just had a flat roof, maybe 2 stories, maybe 1 story. And there it stands in the modern day, looking timeless. Absolutely timeless. A lot of metal, again, in the upper reaches. A lot of metal. Franklin County Courthouse in Mount Vernon, Texas. This one's built in 1912. 8 years later, there's only 1.2 thousand people living there. Still stands, and it's a nice looking structure for sure. Freestone County in Fairfield. This one's built in 1919. The earliest population data I could find is from 1940. Only 1,000 people living there. So turn back the clocks 20 years. How many people are living there at the time? Yes, I think we are witnessing a concerted effort to erase the infrastructure of the past. Right down to the county, I think there's much more to the old world, and I think the new America, the new world, has been overlaid on an older civilization. Frio County in Pearsall, Texas. This one's built in 1904 at a time, well, 6 years later, that there's 1.7 thousand people living there. That's not very many people. And these guys are getting their pictures taken out front. Really proud of their creation. I don't know. What do you think? And what do they do to this one down through time? They had to expand on it, right? Because the population grew. No, they shrunk it. Shrunk it down to this. Let's go back to this one. You can see where they shrunk it to. They took the top floor, they took the tower, everything above this line has been removed. Go back here, you can see. And they've just flattened it off. But it's still showing us a few signs of that old world splendor. So this concludes my first part of Texas County Courthouses. Stay tuned for parts 2 and 3, and I appreciate you watching. This has been an old world exploration. If you're new to the channel, don't forget to subscribe, hit the thumbs up button, and comment. I believe we are in the process of remembering who we really are and casting off the shackles of illusion. Until next time.